Some chase greatness, others build it. From the heart of New York, where every possession feels like destiny, comes the pulse, the fire, the relentless Redstorm. This is not a podcast. This is a proving ground. A battlefield where fans become family, where voices clash, truth bleeds through passion, and loyalty is not spoken, it's lived. We are here to question, to challenge, to ignite, to ask not what St. John's was, but what it's about to become. Led by Coach Pitino's vision, fueled by the city's soul, driven by fans who never back down. Because here, we don't whisper opinions, we declare war with words. Every debate, every drop of sweat, every heartbeat, this is Redstorm Nation Unfiltered. You just stepped into Relentless Redstorm.
Welcome to the Empire.
I'm Jason Safford, and alongside my partner in the storm, Derrel Jazz Johnson, we bring you the pulse of New York, the pride of St. John's, and the relentless heartbeat of Redstorm Nation. Tonight, we're diving deep, not just into the game, but into the soul of the city that breathes it. Because here in New York, fandom isn't just passion, it's identity. And when that first whistle blows, you're not just watching, you're part of the storm. Let's debate, let's connect, let's get relentless. All right, Derrel. So we've got a big schedule coming up here, and I want to talk a little bit about the comparison of the team from October to November and now going into December. One of the things that's really important to me to look at is Rick Pitino put together a gruesome schedule for this team starting in the preseason with the game against Michigan. And Michigan has now demonstrated to everyone, including the AP poll, that they are a real contender. Now remember, St. John's went to overtime with them in preseason. Both teams have had very different paths over the start of the season. St. John's is now 4-3 after a month in which they played three really big, tough, top 25 teams, two of which are SEC teams that have the same firepower but different size. And one that was a heartbreaker where St. John's really won that game, except they collapsed in the last couple of minutes. So, my take, November was exactly what Rick Pitino needed to expose the character and all the flaws so he can now work in that cauldron that you keep referring to and making these guys into real weapons for March.
Absolutely. First thing, I can't see myself, but you can see me, correct?
I can see you, although you're
Okay.
frozen on the screen. It's not a bad picture of you, though.
Okay. Let's see if that's okay. All right. I'm actually in the city where the St. John's Redstorm lost 2 of 3 games last week. Las
That's
Vegas. I won't say what casino I'm staying at, but the Wi-Fi is a little shoddy. So hopefully that does not happen again. But just a little pushback to one thing that you said. I think the Iowa State win was a legitimate win. Obviously, St. John's could have pulled it out, but Iowa State was up 10 in the first half, and I think ultimately that's why they pulled the game out. Could have went either way, but I can't say that St. John's blew the game. I would probably say that more if Iowa State had let that 10-point lead in the first half go and lost a close game had they lost by 1 point. we have learned a lot about this St. John's Red Storm team through November. I think as we head into the December schedule starting this Saturday, um, one thing I think the biggest issue that the team has is the point guard position. Dylan Darling um, may not be a capable Big East point guard. He definitely doesn't seem to be a capable point guard against these top 25 teams. And he had a uh, horrific 3 games in Las Vegas. Only played 7 minutes in uh, the last game in Las Vegas, which may be a sign that Rick Pitino was frustrated with him as well. So at the same time, Ian Jackson is a turnover machine, and he can't play if he can't take care of the ball. Poor decision making. He's an excellent scorer, but he should not play if he continues to turn the ball over. But somebody's got to play on the team. So I think that's the biggest dilemma going into the games in December. I think the second dilemma or the second issue is rebounding. This team is giving up way too many offensive boards. They are not cleaning up the defensive boards. And they're not rebounding offensively. They're not getting as many offensive boards as they got a season ago. Recipe for disaster to give up a lot of offensive rebounds, and may be a little drastic, but Ruben Prey, who has been successful off the bench, I think he could definitely play with Zuby and Hopkins. If that problem isn't fixed, St. John's may need to go to a bigger starting lineup with Ruben Prey, Zuby, and Hopkins in the front court to make sure that you get those offensive boards and more those defensive boards, prevent the offensive boards from the other team, and then get more offensive boards themselves. So I think those are the two biggest issues, I guess, that I had in November. I do think they are correctable, but I think the rebounding is an easier fix than a point guard situation. I mean, you have the talent that's on the roster. So if you have somebody who played in a mid-major last year and isn't ready to play in the big games in the Big East, that will be a problem, and that would mean that Dylan Darling can't play.
You make some great points, and going back to November as a whole, the exposure of the point guard position not living up to expectation, both for the fans as well as Pitino, is something that I think Pitino actually was prepared for, but we as fans didn't expect to be such a gruesome gap within this bigger St. John's offensive powerhouse. And so I want to get into that and sort of recognize that if you look at St. John's in terms of its organization, this St. John's offense, not only compared to last year, but over the last 10 years, this is the best offensive unit that the university has put together in a really long time. They have tremendous firepower, which they've demonstrated. They're one of the top teams in the nation, both in scoring, but also in possessions. Now, it's absolutely obvious that they are struggling at the point guard position. And to your point, the difficulty that Pitino has right now is the mindset of his two major players at that position. The difference between Darling and Jackson is absolutely one of size, physicality, and overall mentality. Okay, you have Darling, who is an up-tempo, kid who can push it. He's very, very good with the ball in terms of ball possession. However, he lacks the speed, he lacks the size, and in some ways, he really lacks the overall ball IQ in terms of making sure that he's boxing out properly and getting ahead of the guys that are bigger than him. He's got to play tougher, but not trying to play like a 6'9" power forward. He's just got to play tougher in his 5'11" body. Jackson, on the other hand, to your point, I love the fact that you called him a machine, but unfortunately one, that's giving the ball away. Jackson is a machine. He can be a machine on offense and a machine on defense. He has that ability. He has the ball IQ. What he's lacking right now is the mentality, and that's where Pitino has a lot of work to do on Jackson's mindset, getting him to understand exactly what it means to be the floor general for an offense like this. Now, those two things being said, in terms of November and the progression of this team, here's what I like, Derrel. You saw 3 great games in a row in Vegas, where by game 3, the team had been through 2 ringers. They lost, a very, very competitive game against Iowa State. And I will accept your pushback. You're absolutely right. Iowa State has proven that they're a top 10 team. And it's not just how they played St. John's. It's how they're playing overall. They are a very, very organized and well put together team. And they stood up to St. John's. And I think that's what the fans have to kind of get used to, is that St. John's is a target now. They were ranked 5 in the preseason, and they had a target on their back in all 3 games where these teams, Alabama, Iowa State, Auburn, played them to the best of their ability. And St. John's, not that they weren't ready, but I don't think that they expected these teams to come after them with the level of intensity that they did. So now let's step forward to Baylor, where they did win. And it was a very convincing and impressive win, despite the fact that they were severely out-rebounded, not only on the offensive glass, but in the entire game. It was an awful performance in one area of their team, but the rest of the performance, in terms of defense and offense overall, was absolutely stellar. So now they carry that forward into the 3rd game against Auburn, and Auburn's coming off of this very, very ugly display against Michigan. But credit again to how well Michigan is playing, because Auburn came out against St. John's and went toe-to-toe in the first half, where St. John's had to adjust and finally figure out how they were going to play. And they had a great first half, the second 10 minutes of the half. The second half was a total collapse. And you have to say, okay, well, maybe it was 3 days, 3 games, they were just exhausted. But it was also the fact that Auburn took it to this team because they were just as tired, and they were determined to just be more resilient. So they exposed something that they had that St. John's needs to develop. And this is where Rick Pitino has to see the opportunity. And I think this is what he was looking for. But now we have to step forward into December and see, will Pitino be able to deliver what this team is supposed to be on paper by getting into their minds and getting into their hearts and making every practice and every tape review and every preparation for every game a clinic that these guys buy into?
And just to, I didn't mention any stats when I was talking about Darling versus Ian Jackson, but just a comparison to hammer it home. Uh, Dylan Darling had 6 total points in 3 games in Las Vegas. 6 total points in 3 games. Jackson had 8 total turnovers. Uh, Ideally, you would want Darling's points to be a lot higher than Jackson's turnovers. Um, so again, it's a very you wish you could have one guy. You wish you could mash them up and turn Dylan Darling and Ian Jackson into one player. That's not possible. Um, and I Ian Jackson is a turnover machine. He's also a scoring machine. He needs to lessen his turnovers. Pitino will give him the minutes on the court. Pitino said he's probably the most, and I'm not sure if he probably used the word probably, but he said he was the most talented guy on the team. He's the only guy that was. I don't know if he's dropped with his, you know, up and down play in November, but he was predicted on the site NBADraft.net a couple of weeks ago to be a lottery pick in the 2026 NBA draft. He's not going to stay in that position if he keeps turning the ball over.
So you end November 4-3, 2 heartbreakers, 1 statement win, 1 very disappointing loss, but you go forward into December with the beginnings of a real identity. And obviously, when you're bringing together 8 new players around a core of 4 guys from last year, coming off an incredible run last year and trying to do even better this year, obviously you're in a pressure cooker, and December now becomes the critical path forward. They've got an upcoming game this Saturday against Ole Miss in the Garden. It's another SEC opponent, and you have to think to yourself, especially with more than 10 days off. Well, actually, I think it is exactly 10 days off, or 11. But that amount of time, Pitino's got to have something for these guys to chew on. So they're coming out and really establishing themselves in a different way to open this game, as well as set the tone early and make another statement win.
Absolutely. They need a statement win against a team like uh, Ole Miss. But to look a little further into the schedule in December, man, that game against Kentucky, it's too early to say it's a must-win game. But
Oh, Pitino's got it circled. You know he has it circled.
he had it circled before the season started. But now it might be double or triple circled because you can't keep losing to AP top 25 teams. You're going to. I think the diehard uh, Johnny fans will always be there, but one of the greatest, and we've talked about it certainly in person. I'm not sure if you've talked about it on the podcast, but one of the greatest benefits of Patino turning this program around so quickly, he has said we get Knicks crowds at the Garden for these St. John's games, and those fans are bandits, and they will abandon the ship if he doesn't course correct and get this team back on track. And you get it on track by taking out teams you should take out and then beating a team that may be ranked a little higher than you by the time you play them, and that will be the Kentucky Wildcats, the team that Rick Pitino led to an NCAA championship.
Derrel, you make such a fantastic point. I really have to credit you with bringing something up that no other college basketball team has to deal with. St. John's plays in the mecca of basketball with a fan base that is more aggressive, more particular, and more impatient than any other fan base in college basketball. You could go down to Cameron Stadium, and whether Duke is 0-35 or 35-0, they're going to be a sellout. You're not going to lose a Duke fan, okay? You could go to Ohio State, and it's the same thing. Happy Valley, it's the same thing. No matter where you go. Kentucky fans are going to be there regardless of whether Kentucky wins or loses. But in Queens, at St. John's, you've got to establish yourself and be at the competitive level of a pro basketball franchise in order to attract these fans into the Garden. Rick Pitino has successfully done that. Now, how do you keep them there? You got to play a level of basketball that is absolutely physical, fearless, and fast. Now, this team has all of those qualities, okay? They have to put it together. One of the things that I think you recognize about the Kentucky game is now, based on how Pitino set up this schedule, that game which he circled, and you said now he's circled it 2 or 3 times, it is the pivotal moment of the season. Whether Pitino knew they were going to be 6-1, 5-2, 4-3 in November, now that Pitino, chemistry, that Pitino cauldron has to work, especially to be able to be ready for that game. And the mental, development that Pitino is a master of with his players really has to be exposed in these next couple of games between Ole Miss, then Iona, and then DePaul, which is to start the Big East season. So the one thing that I really like about how November ended is that unlike Michigan, unlike Iowa State, who, credit to them, played fantastic basketball and demonstrated that they're top 10 teams right now, St. John's now has more fire because those losses make them realize they got to work harder. They've got to commit deeper. And that's going to really reveal something that these other teams may not be able to tap into in March.
And I stretched the importance of the Kentucky game, which is in Atlanta, before I am assuming, and I totally expect the Red Storm to beat Ole Miss, Iona, and DePaul. If they do not win those first 3 games in December, then we have way bigger problems with this team than we anticipated. So I am certainly confident in making the assumption that they will take out Ole Miss on Saturday, Iona the following Saturday, and then DePaul on December 16th before they battle with Kentucky Wildcats on December 20th in Atlanta. Might be like a road game. I would expect more Kentucky fans than St. John's fans as well, which will be a challenge that they haven't faced this season. They faced the top 25 teams either at Madison Square Garden or on a neutral site. So this would be their first time in environment that may not be dominated by red, may be dominated by blue.
Absolutely. I want to jump into the game on Saturday against Ole Miss. A couple of key matchups that are going to be really critical, Derrel. Bryce Hopkins is going to probably be matching up against Elias Camerdine. Two really, really good players. Hopkins is the high scorer for St. John's currently, and I think that he's really going to get some great looks against Camerdine. It's also going to be how well Hopkins plays against him on defense. Additional to that, you got James Scott for Ole Miss, who is a big rebounder going up against Zuby. So we have to see who's going to win that battle in terms of rebounding control, as well as Scott being a great defender and rim protection. Both of those guys are really hustle players. Then you have Dylan Mitchell, who, again, is the disruptor for St. John's, an incredible two-way talent. I think he's just going to continue to blossom under Pitino, and very much like R.J. Lewis Jr. last year, Mitchell has all the ability to really shine in the Pitino, structure of two-way hustle. In terms of the shooting and pace battle, this is where St. John's, coming out of that tournament, has an opportunity because Ole Miss is really struggling on offense right now. However, they are a very good defensive team, and so it's really a matter of whether or not St. John's continue their hot shooting, averaging nearly 50%, shooting this year, and almost 40% three-pointers, which, again, compared to last year's team, not that we really need to make any comparisons, but the offensive stats are there with this team. And, now we have an opportunity with Ole Miss to see, coming out of this tournament, how much better can St. John's get on the offensive end. The defensive rebounding, again, Ole Miss is a really good team in terms of defensive rebounding, as well as just their defense overall. They're one of the better teams in terms of keeping teams below 80 points. So, will St. John's, who averages, over 90 points a game, be able to hit their numbers, or is Ole Miss going to, really dominate, and it's going to be a struggle for them?
And this may be the final point I want to make, but you mentioned Hopkins. He has certainly been the best player on this team through November. He did struggle in the loss to Auburn. I will chalk that up to tired legs. Certainly, Osiah Sellers, you could see it on his shot. They were all short. That is a sign of tired legs. The team needs more from Zuby. Zuby did score the ball well in that game, but Zuby is not rebounding the ball like he did last year, and he's got to push through. He's got to be the best rebounder on this team. He has the ability to do that. He needs to get back on those offensive boards. I understand that teams are expecting him on offensive boards this year, but he's got to get more proactive on that end, and he's got to dominate the defensive boards. Come on, Zuby. Dominate the paint in boards. And that starts not just with scoring, but with cleaning up the defensive glass.
I agree with you 100%, and I'm going to give you the final word here in a minute. The one thing that I think we all need to recognize, to your point, is how much pressure is on the coaching staff now, because of the fact that these teams recognize that Zuby is going to be Zuby, and so they're going after him. And we hoped that with Hopkins and some of these other portal players coming in, that they were going to take the pressure off of Zuby. But the reality is, you're absolutely right. Zuby needs to elevate to the next level so that he can be ready for the NBA. and be ready to dominate, because it is something where with the target on your back, you can't just do the same things that you were doing before. You've got to elevate your game. So I think the challenge is to the St. John's coaching staff. Pitino's biggest problem absolutely is the point guard position. But I think Pitino's biggest challenge is elevating Zuby so that the point guard, as well as Hopkins and whoever the three is going to be able to feed off of Zuby's energy, feed off of his rebounding and second chance points, because that's what energized the team last year. And you see it when Zuby's in the game, when he's making the difference that he is, it energizes the team. Final stat for you, Derrel. When Zuby is off the floor, St. John's is negative 30% in defense.
That's an incredible stat. That is an incredible stat. But it cements the importance of Zuby Ejiofor to this 2025-2026 St. John's Redstorm team. My message to the fans of St. John's Redstorm: did you see things that were concerning in November? Absolutely, you did. The team is 0-3 against ranked teams. That's a problem. But it is certainly not time to panic. We'll bring up the cauldron again. It's Rick Pitino, Hall of Fame coach. In Rick we trust. We believe that Rick Pitino will get these problems fixed, and they will play a lot better in December. Remember, I'm going to keep saying this. The key is to have this team firing on all cylinders going into the Big East tournament in late February, and then going into the NCAA tournament in March. The key is to be the best you can be in March, not in November, not in December. You do want to see improvement. But the idea is for this team to be firing on all cylinders in March, not November, not December.
All right, you've just been in the eye of the storm, but the conversation doesn't end here. Join us online, hit subscribe, and share your take. Where passion meets perspective, that's Relentless Redstorm. Until next time, stay focused, stay fiery, and as always, stay relentless.